So I'm going to share my screen.
Please do.
All right. Is it coming up? I'm kind of blinking on and off here.
No,
Nope.
it's not coming up.
Hang on.
Here we are.
There it is.
All right.
Yep.
So,
Yep, we see it.
hang on. There you go. You got it? Do you see the agenda?
Yes.
All right. So I'm just going to do by way of introduction. So those of you who don't know
Oh,
me,
actually, Tom, real
yeah,
quick.
yeah.
What we see is the presenter view in PowerPoint. So we see the the main screen, and then we also see next slide and all of the preview slides at the bottom.
Oh,
Just
well,
so you know,
I'm not-
it's
I'm not
really
seeing- I'm not seeing any of that. I'm just okay. Let me just thank you, Nicole. I appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Escape this for a minute. I haven't had this kind of challenge before, but Zoom never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So let me
So,
keep,
That's
I
okay.
think you want to look and view as to be slideshow.
And now we're seeing it. I think it looks like you're seeing it in like Google Slides or something. Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now I'm
No,
just,
it's better. It's better. It's better.
you're actually seeing the slideshow.
No,
No, we're not.
We're seeing the main slide, and then we're seeing a vertical bar on the right. I mean on the left.
we're
of
seeing
the slides.
the screen that would be as it would appear to the person preparing the slides.
In editing mode, not in presentation mode. So you have previews of the slides now on the left.
All right. So I just haven't had this issue before, so I don't know what I'm doing.
If
So
you want,
I
if
would
you want to,
normally
you could just click on the lower right-hand corner and just make it big on your monitor. That'll help us at least.
I mean like that.
Yeah.
Second here. Okay, let me just do this. If I go to full screen, then you just see, I don't see anything but my own slide.
We don't see the whole
Sorry
slide.
for this. Do you see do you just see the agenda right now? That's all I see.
No.
No,
What-
we see.
All right,
Look on the
Yeah,
top where it says
it's swapped.
slideshow.
I'm gonna escape. All right. I'll
You
just
see,
talk you through
at
this.
the top of the
Let's see
screen,
here.
it says use slideshow.
Is it the top of the Zoom screen?
Well, it was at the top of the screen that you were displaying, but now it's changed because you're back under the editing screen. But if you go to the very top under the word, it's let's see.
I think it's fine. Just leave it the way it
Yeah.
is. We can make it out and read it clearly. It's a
Yeah.
little larger than the other version.
All right, can you see the slide I've got on the screen? Because
Yes.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
All right, fair enough. Sorry for this. All right. So I don't know how many of you had a chance to how many of you know me? I've been in land use planning for 40 years. I spent a lot of time advocating for affordable housing. In that time before I went to work for the universities, I worked at Cal, I built UC Merced, worked at San Francisco State, built a lot of student housing. But I will say that, while I was advocating at the state legislature for housing, legislation that was supportive of housing and smart growth back in the 90s, what's happened in the last several years is a sea change in how the state is basically implementing a sort of a force majeure approach to getting cities to just let people build housing, right? So the regulatory landscape has made a huge seismic shift, in my view, over the last few years. And I think a lot of people will ultimately be surprised on just, whether there's discretion involved in housing approvals or not. That's just my take on that, right? Other lawyers may have different views. Sue may have a different view. but I sent out a summary from a firm called Holland and Knight. I have no idea who they were. I just know that they had what I thought was a pretty effective, sort of succinct assessment of what's changed in housing laws just since 2024. You can read that at your leisure. This is just sort of their highlight. And if you guys want to mute, if you got background noise or something like that, that might be helpful. But I think that what I think it was SB 330 and SB 8. I think they were implemented back in 2020 and 2021, perhaps, maybe earlier. They were the ones that sort of did a affordable housing streamlining, the initial phases of this housing streamlining effort under the name of the Housing Crisis Act. And in 2024, they put a number of incentives and bonuses in, as long as sort of forcing this issue of having objective design standards only. But they also tied it, this affordable housing incentive program, to prevailing wage projects, right? Which, may be in and of itself kind of counterproductive to what some would view as how do you create affordable housing. I will say that they're complex in some respects, other ways they're quite simple. But what Oakland has done as a result of the earlier laws passing is they've amended their housing element. Many of you have been involved in that, commented on it. They've now updated their zoning ordinance to match their housing element. And so a lot of the pieces are in place. They're about, I would say, 80% through their objective design standards process. They're not quite bound in ordinance yet. But I think a lot of that kind of informs the context of this discussion about this project that's proposed at 5295 College Avenue. So I'd just like to open up some conversation here before we begin talking about that project, about others' perceptions of what's happening in state housing law, how that's going to affect Rockridge in particular. Like, I noticed that there's a lot of stuff in there about ADUs in recent legislation. They can now be condominiumized, if that's a word. They are also, in some respects, set up as of right. I think that the manufactured housing industry, just as they did with schools and prisons, have pushed for the fact that they want to have pre-approved plans for ADUs, where if you buy your ADU from some company that has pre-approved plans in your jurisdiction, you can just take it and, park it in your backyard if you'd like to. So there's a lot going on in trying to force or help, I would say, facilitate the development of additional housing. Any other comments or thoughts about that context that we're operating in as we proceed to talk about this project or other issues in Rockridge? None?
Tom,
Yeah?
how do you want us to indicate we have a question? Raise
Oh.
our hand.
Well, I am, let me see if I can get up a full gallery view here. I'm only seeing 2 people at the moment. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I think I've got everybody up who's on the screen. Okay, yeah, just raise your hand.
Okay.
And electronically.
That person will go to the top of your screen.
All right, so Ronnie, I'll start with you.
How
And
the
then
hell you do that?
Okay, yeah, wasn't quite sure. Are you, I'm happy you're giving this explanation. Has it been published in the Rockridge News? I don't remember seeing it.
I think there have been articles in the past about specific laws. I'm sort of working on an article, which is, part of the research I've been doing, actually, is just to bring myself up to speed as what's been going on in the last 5 years in the housing sector in particular. My work has been, my consulting work's been focused on universities pretty much. I've been out of the affordable housing, advocacy role for many years, other than trying to build affordable student housing. And so I'm gonna be writing an article to kind of try to put my arms around this and help other people put their arms around it.
But
Thank
this,
you.
this came out after the last Rockridge News was published.
And I understand that, but he just said that we're about 2/3 of the way through the revisions of the zoning code, and that's why I'm asking, is the public getting informed? Because I'm kind of a little surprised myself where we are.
Yeah, the objective design standards have moved through a pretty tight circle and a relatively, I don't know, somewhat episodic public interaction. Okay. I may have some of this wrong. I know Kirk Peterson was asked to serve on one of their experts committees or something. I think they asked a number of people involved in housing to sort of serve to give them a more expert review. And then they came out and they had, I believe, they may have had some preliminary meetings last year, but then this year they had one sort of public meeting, and it was on Zoom. It was difficult to interact with. They were trying to explain things interactively, and you were supposed to comment on the site while they were doing it. It was, I just thought it was a bit of a mess myself. Trying to do something that's a public process where they used to write things on the wall or whatever when people would talk. You're supposed to write it on your own wall, was kind of my impression of that experience. Is there anybody else here that tried to participate in that public meeting? I see no hand. Right. So I thought it was somewhat difficult. And then I recently saw something where they intend to publish the draft this fall. And then the draft will be taking comments through, I think, through the planning commission hearing process. It may be going to design review again, but maybe others here are more specifically informed on the process on that, the objective design standards. These are objective design standards that are focused on 4 to 8 story buildings, by the way. The assumption, I believe, is that they will work on the shorter buildings and the taller buildings later, I'm guessing. But there's a big part of this statewide push that only quote unquote objective design standards may be used to review projects that that they either pass or they fail based on those criteria should be so clearly objective that a project either passes or fails on those criteria. And the idea is that then all approvals for housing, or most, can be done through they call them ministerial approvals, which means basically staff can handle it. There's no public hearing. If public hearings are required, there's a maximum number of public hearings that can be held on a project of 5, including actions in and around any CEQA activity, whether it's a, mitigated negative declaration or a full CEQA analysis. Stu, you got your hand up. I'm going to let you speak up here because you may have more to say about this than from a legal standpoint than I do.
Yeah, I've been following this fairly closely for the last few years, and I would have to say that what's been going on in the legislature is, frankly, under the leadership of 3 or 4 legislators, including specifically Nancy Skinner and Senator Weiner. There's been a push to, as you say, take the all of the, as it were, guesswork or discretion out of housing approvals, and of course, one of the things that goes along with making something ministerial, where it either meets the standards or it doesn't, is that you can't do CEQA. There is no CEQA for any ministerial approval. Because CEQA requires that there be discretion, and if there's no discretion, then what's to be discussed under CEQA? So, and that's been the intent of these bills, particularly those authored by Senator Weiner, is to essentially take CEQA out of, and CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. It's the primary law that allows people to understand and comment on the environmental impacts of a project. And essentially what the legislator has been saying is housing is important. We don't give a damn about what it does to the environment. It's just going to go. And that's the way it's been going. And likewise, there is less and less tolerance of any discretion on local authorities as to what they approve, because the legislature believes that a lot of jurisdictions are digging in their heels and refusing to approve projects that the legislature believes ought to be approved. And so they're basically taking the discretion out of the housing approval process, saying the only thing you get to say is whether it meets objective standards. If it meets those standards, you have to build it. That's what the legislature is doing. I'm a little bit disturbed by it because there's very little consideration of affordability in all of this. The same rules are applying to both affordable housing and market rate housing, which means we're getting lots and lots of market rate housing, frankly, a lot of which I don't think we need, but not all that much affordable housing, because affordable housing needs funding, and that is what we don't have. So that's my comments.
All right, thanks, Stu. Any other comments from others? Seeing no hands, or
I see Meredith.
I had a hand up. My name is Greg Pasquale. I live in Rockridge and used to be on the RCPC. And I build housing all over the Bay Area, including about 1,000 apartments in Oakland over the last few years. And so I use a lot of these laws, like state density bonus law, SB 330, that people are talking about. One clarification, I think, Stu, your point, you're not wrong about a lot of the intention. You're kind of on target. But with regard to CEQA, there is still CEQA. CEQA, under most of these laws, and even under most of the ministerial approval processes, CEQA still requires, demonstrating that you're compliant with, through a bunch of technical studies, with, disclosing the air quality impacts and other impacts. There may just not be necessarily a discretion to vote on it. It's really down to like a technical study of, is it within the thresholds of significance? Does it create more air quality impact, or, so forth, and environmental impact to groundwater or emergency services or things like that? Like, that's all still analyzed, and that all can stop a project still. So CEQA still has a function and still does protect the environment. There are only a couple of these laws, SB 423, which doesn't actually apply in Oakland yet. It might 3 years from now, but San Francisco is the only city where in the state where SB 423 actually applies right now. That one does allow you to circumvent CEQA, but at a very high cost, because you then have to build all prevailing wage. So I thought that was a worthwhile clarification. The other thing, there was a little talk before about objective design standards, and I think the objective design standards are actually, they're good in terms of forcing cities to like go through a public process and really identify what are the things we actually care about. What is it that we say makes good design, so that you don't have hearings where, people are arguing over whether a building should be blue or green, because that's not an objective design standard. And so, that process is good, but I think you also have to be aware that like some of these laws even do let you kind of choose to chuck any of those objective design standards you might like to into the trash if you don't want to comply with them, by including affordable housing on site. If you include a set amount of affordable housing on site, you qualify for waivers, incentives, concessions that get you out of having to comply with those objective design standards. So, there is a whole group of laws at play here, and I think this project kind of recklessly tries to use a few of them in ways they don't really work. Like SB 423, they cite and they say, oh yeah, using that, and it's like, but that law doesn't even work in Oakland for like 3 more years, so I'm not sure how. And none of these laws get you out of, well, they can get you like housing density bonuses and other things. They don't necessarily get you out of some of the things that this project would have to get out of. Like, this project says it's building 35 or 40,000 square feet of office and a hotel with no parking. Like, sure, you could have no parking for the residential, but like those uses couldn't have no parking. So this is sort of like just a kind of insane application of some of these state laws that like I know pretty well because it's my job to use them every day. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't get how this thing is possible at all, even as an entitlement. But maybe they can get that done. But I do think it's important to recognize that like lots of people entitle lots of projects. And all that means is they put pictures on paper that no one will ever build. And when I look at this, I'm like, there is not a developer in California or the nation that would build a project like this. It's way too expensive. And also nobody wants that amount of residential, that amount of hotel, and certainly nobody wants office anywhere.
You're talking about 5295?
Yeah. So I want to like put that out there from a sort of developer's point of view and the point of view of somebody who uses these state laws of like, there's some pretty wild stuff going on here that's sort of beyond the pale. Even as somebody who like believes in lots of dense housing near transit and in neighborhoods like Rockridge, this one to me is like wild. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for that. It's funny, when I click, I can see your face, but I don't see you on the grid. I don't know. Are you under another name or something? Are you in a stealth?
I just have my video off right now because I'm
Okay.
actually
So
putting
when the
kids to
video's
bed.
not on, it doesn't show up a blank name or something. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
This is Meredith, and I'll take my hand down so it's not hanging around up there. But can you review what the current and proposed height story limitations are for this property? Because I do remember that at some point about 10 years ago, there was a real community process where we all trucked down to, formerly Berkeley City College, but, down by Children's Hospital. And we, put Post-its on the wall and we kind of came around to increasing the height story limitation on Broadway, I believe, to 6 stories. And so when I see projects like the original proposal for CCA and this proposal, which are so egregiously in excess of that, and I'm thinking, okay, you get some bonus points for affordability, which might give you a story, but how do you get to 15 stories out of that? And I have to say, I agree with the last speaker that the feasibility of this project seems extremely low as far as what it would cost to build and the infrastructure that it would require to support it. So I'm not passing out with stress about this because I think there are a lot of financial hurdles that would keep this project from ever happening, thank heaven. But where are these very tall, bulky buildings coming from? Are they just Hail Mary passes, like let's throw it and see if anybody pays attention? Or are the impending changes to the housing element so extraordinary that this potentially could be approved?
So
let's jump in about state density bonus law, which says that if you include affordable units, which this project does and the CCA project does, that meet a certain threshold, it's not just like there's a set number of bonus housing units that you get through that law. You might qualify for a bonus of 20 or 30%, or now they've increased the state density bonus law that you can get 50%, you can get 100% bonus on the density. But it doesn't matter, because as soon as you qualify for even the minimum bonus under state density bonus law, let's say you qualify for a 20% bonus, the state has been very clear, HCD, the state agency that kind of makes the technical determinations, has been very clear that that doesn't mean that you can only get 20% taller. Like,
I gave him a walk
for my high rise in downtown.
Well, when the cleaners were here, I'm sorry, I gave him one.
We once you are out of the housing limit, we more than doubled the height of the high rise with the city's support and the neighborhood support in that case. But once you say I'm taking waiver from the height limit, that's it. Like, there is no height limit. The sky is the limit.
Wow.
And how
did we let
is
that
the state
happen?
law.
Well, but
That's
wait
the
a
state
minute.
law.
How did they let that?
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I have a few things to say. My understanding is,
There are people talking. I can't see you. Is there
Who's speaking?
speaking?
Tom Dolan.
Okay, Tom, thank you.
My understanding is that under the zoning, the density bonus, you get 3 zoning gimmies. And that's it. And my understanding is that this project would require many, many more than 3 zoning concessions. So I think that's worth thinking about or talking about.
Uh-huh.
Are we gonna express our opinions about this?
Well,
tonight,
let me
or just just talk technicalities?
Yeah, well, let me just do the following. First of all, I want to respond to one earlier question about what is the underlying height limit in this district? I looked on the city's zoning map, which I believe is now current. It showed this area as having a 55-foot height limit, right? And I believe that's higher than it once was. And if not, then they haven't really amended the plans that are on the city's website. I remember they had an interactive, like an overlay zone height limit for housing that was somewhat different. I couldn't find that in the city's documents as I was trying to do some research on this project. But obviously the height limit in the city's base zoning is not, 170 feet or whatever this building.
Doesn't matter.
But yeah, they are trying to take advantage. They're trying to take advantage of 2 50% bonuses. One is for low and I think it's low and very low income housing. Another one is for moderate income housing. They're taking a 50% bonus on each one. That's kind of how they get from 44 units to 88 units. They're throwing in 72 hotel rooms. I don't even know where that sits in the code. The only thing that's in the CN1 zone that's I think allowable as of right is something that's called semi-transient housing, which is something that I find hard to even understand what their definition is, but it's not a hotel, it's not a bed and breakfast, it's not an Airbnb. And I'm just let me just put a few things up on the screen here. Can you see let me see the full, I'm going to try to put this slide up. Okay, so I took the liberty of sort of trying to highlight. Can you see that slide I've got there? Can you read
Yes.
it as a for you? All right, so the project details are something that was on the city's website for the project. I'll just take you to the big blue square, or it's kind of square off to the left. That is a summary of the ministerial review elements of SB 35. Note it's not SB 30 or SB 330 or SB 8. And this is where they're claiming the right of ministerial review because it's gotten it contains 2 or more residential units. It's on a site that is both a legal parcel located in the city in an urbanized area, and it's got 75% of its perimeter. Adjoining sites are commercial in nature, right? So that's the get out of jail free card they're calling for their ministerial review, right? I don't know. I've shared this with some of you. It turns out the architecture firm that's working on this, one of the principals of the firm is somebody I worked with 30 years ago. We would do these things for people that own properties that wanted to sell them. We'd sort of do a, maximum capacity analysis of the site. They would use it to go market the property. In this case, I think this owner, based on some conversation that I've seen a record of, feels like he's got an opportunity to lock in the capacity of the site under these new rules, within 180 days. And I think he's feeling if he can get that kind of locked in, maybe it's before the objective design standards are finalized in any way for buildings of this scale, that, he'll have a more worthwhile property to sell to somebody who might imagine that they could build this. I tend to agree with Greg in my development experience. Financing a mixed use project with 2 uses is complicated enough. If you got 4 uses, it's almost impossible to get the money to actually build it. But the zoning is CN1 base zoning. It's got this S13 combined, which is also a rather complex. I think that's part of the overlay that's in the new zoning code. Anybody
Design.
here who knows more about what the S13 implies than I could figure out?
I think it's design review.
It's something that exempts you from design review, or it puts you into design?
I think it's some special design review. I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
Who
All right.
knows? Mm.
All right.
Isn't a key question whether a hotel is a permissible use under the zone?
It's not.
Yeah.
It's
So-
not conditionally permitted. It's not permitted in any way.
Correct.
It would require
So-
rezoning.
Right. And so I have this threshold question then about whether you can even get through, whether this process could apply at all, never mind what you think about it. And it seems to me that is a narrow area, a point of entry for dealing with the city on this. I just don't understand why it's, I mean, I think their play is they want to get it entitled, and then they're going to flip it because they've got an entitled project, great. And then somebody else will build something that's a smaller footprint. That's their play. But I don't know if they get to play in the sandbox if they're talking about a hotel.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think you may be right. I think there may be a couple things here that are, poison pills, or if you will, for the city's review. I think the city has, is it 30 days to comment on the submittal or something like that? I haven't talked to any of the city planners about this. I'm not sure they would talk to you until they've done their own review, to be honest with you. But obviously it's a pretty ambitious project on a somewhat awkward site. I think, they may be waiving setbacks of all kinds as a result of what they believe to be their exemptions, including the fact that they back up to single family homes on the street behind College Avenue.
Tom, can I just alert you that there have been some people in the queue for a while,
With
specifically.
their hands up? Maybe I'm not seeing.
That's okay. I'm here to help you out.
Thank you.
We got Ken Rich. I think Star was in. I don't know if she still wants to be in the queue. But if we could start with Ken.
I don't even see Ken on my screen.
I'm here, I promise you.
I hear you.
If you aren't sharing the screen, if you drop the screen share, you'll see a lot more people.
I'll handle the queue. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of what I want to say has been said, particularly by Greg. Thank you, Greg, for the knowledgeability of your help here. What I just wanted to point out is, they're probably using the density bonus more or less correctly. They probably can get 88 units. Whether they can get the hotel and some other things is not as clear. But the one thing that hasn't really come up that I think is probably pretty important to this community is they are claiming SB 423, which is the really powerful streamlining that gets rid of CEQA and that forces the city, if it meets the zoning and the objective design standards, to approve a project quickly. They are misunderstanding its applicability. In Oakland, I'm fairly sure I'm correct here, you need 50% low-income units to qualify for SB 423. They don't have, I think they have 25% low-income units because their moderate income units qualify for the density bonus, but they don't qualify towards SB 23. In San Francisco, for reasons that are somewhat humorous, but I won't bore people with, you can do SB 423 with a market rate project that's only got a little bit of affordability. In Oakland, you need 50% affordability for 3 more years. So possibly one of the more frightening things to the community would be that, this project could be approved ministerially with nobody's voice heard and all that. I don't think it can, as currently proposed. Now, having said that, I agree with a bunch of folks who said this is a completely vapor project that could never be built. There's probably nothing preventing them from just saying, all right, we'll do more affordability so we can get the SB 423 approvals. But no one's ever going to build that project and would have to get it reapproved later with whatever the real project was. So I don't think we're going to see this being rammed through, at least as I understand the laws.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, I think Star was in the queue back.
We've kind of moved on from what we had been talking about before, but I did just have a quick comment about CEQA and the housing laws that have been passed recently. There was a comment that the lawmakers don't care about the environment. I don't think that's true. I think that homelessness in general is a very negative impact on the environment, particularly when it comes to watersheds. It's a big issue, not just well, in a lot of different areas. But in terms of CEQA, one of the issues about CEQA is that it takes aesthetic effects into account. And a lot of what's been happening in the real estate legal circles, what people have been talking about is the fact that there's been a perception that CEQA was weaponized and used basically to stall projects, particularly on things like aesthetics. And so that's why we're having things like objective design standards come about now.
Right.
I think I see Myrna and then Ronnie, and I think that's who I see now.
How do you put your hand up? I don't see it on here.
The bottom, you go down to the bottom where it says,
Reactions.
react, and then it lets you put your
Reactions.
hand up.
Okay, got it.
Yes, I certainly support a lot of what I've heard, but what I've heard is people don't really know if this thing could get by, or maybe they just cut out the hotel and they could get by. Don't really know whether zoning can be overrun in that way, and are very concerned about the idea of 15 stories going up right next to a neighborhood. So, and the thought that, well, nobody will ever build it, don't count on it, maybe not now, but maybe later things may change. So I think it's terribly important that the experts in this group really analyze it to make sure that as the city reviews it, they're analyzing it correctly too, and find any way the height part can be stopped. Any loophole or any way that we can make our feelings known, because this thing could go through, and even though we think it never would be built, we might be surprised. So I really ask for a very rigid review by the experts here, and not wait for the city on this, because they could outrun the waiting period. If they have to respond in a certain amount of time, maybe they won't get it done. So I think it's up to us.
Thank you.
Ronnie?
Okay, so actually this wasn't what I was going to say, but following on Myrna, there was one time when I was doing land use for RCPC, and the city did misinterpret something, and we found it out, and then it was corrected. This was for the CCA project, and it gave us a lot of leverage on how it went in. This was for the dorm that's now on Broadway. So
can you be more specific, Ronnie?
I could follow up with the board later, or you, but all that I'm going to say is I do encourage Tom, I truly encourage you to do exactly what Myrna said and get some people to analyze it and contact the planner. And particularly if people like Greg and Ken and such think it's misapplied, let them know immediately, because it gives you a lot of leverage in the decision. I also want to say, I personally think this is a fine project if it went in as it is, but I think other people might not. I think that's a great use for that part of College Avenue. But I think that you really want to think through what the community wants, okay? Because other people probably don't like it. So I think that should guide how you're approaching this, okay? Thank you, that's it.
Stu?
Yeah, I'm a little bit, in fact, I'm more than a little bit concerned about this being put forward as an SB 35 project. I litigated on one SB 35 project, one of the first ones that came through. And one of the things about an SB 35 project, you only have a very limited amount of time to object to whether it qualifies for SB 35. And if you don't raise it at that point, then you can't raise it ever.
Right.
And furthermore, there's another law, SB 330, that was authored by Nancy Skinner, that has gone into effect. And that one really raises a scary prospect for the city if it was to turn down this project as an SB 35 project, because that project allows you, it's an amendment to the Housing Accountability Act. And for a project that contains any affordable units, it allows a developer to sue the city for not approving the project. And if the developer wins, the city has to pay the developer's attorney's fees. And that's scary because that can be a huge amount of money, which Oakland can't afford. So Oakland is going to be very scared of raising issues about this project and saying, you know, this doesn't qualify, because they may be afraid of being sued, which is one of the things that's happened in the legislature the past few years. It's made cities very scared of litigation.
Thank you. Next, who has their hand up?
I don't see anyone raise their hand. Thomas, were you trying to get in the queue?
Yeah,
no, I'm
it
not.
says reactions. It says play chime for raised hands, recognize hand gestures. Sorry, I'm not seeing myself. So
No
I'm not
problem.
seeing
Go
how to do
ahead.
this.
Go ahead.
If you click on the smiley face instead of the chevron up arrow, click on the
See, I just raised my hand. Okay, so who wants to talk? Is that you, Tom Dolan?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
You're clapping now. That's good enough.
I'm going to speak as a neighbor now, and I'm going to speak about the size of the project. And I generally speaking favor projects, and I hate to come across as a NIMBY, but I think it's way out of scale for its surroundings. I think it's really unfortunate that some wonderful urban fabric will be removed by the project, including 3 great restaurants. And I don't know whether that's what we're talking about tonight, but I think you need to hear from the community. And I live quite near there. I live in the Pumpkin House at James and Clifton. And I don't know whether that's part of the conversation tonight or not, but I can't resist at least saying what I think and expressing how I feel as an architect and as a citizen.
Thanks. Yeah, I think one of the tricky things these days is that simply an objection doesn't carry much water. It's more about finding the technical basis for the objection that seems to matter in the world we currently live in. And that's all I'll say about that. Any other comments or thoughts on this?
Tom, I would like to talk.
Sure, go ahead.
Merrill Gardens and the Baxter Apartments were required to step back from the residential district. Why is this project not required to do that?
Good question. I believe that under some of the allowances in SB 35, possibly 423, which isn't mentioned here, at least in the submittal to the city, and SB 330, is that if there are no objective design standards that currently apply, and I don't think the city has adopted their objective design standards yet, which is why I think this might be trying to jump out in front of those, that once you get these bonuses, it also gives you waivers from various setbacks. You know, it's not. Is that great?
I can jump in, Mark, specifically. Yeah, no, great try. Very kind of circling around it. The 2 projects that SRM developed, the Merrill Gardens and Baxter, were both before 2018, and 2018 was really a watershed year for state density bonus law. It existed before that, but it was given a lot more power, and also just the development community learned to use it a lot more effectively after 2018. And there's been a bunch of kind of technical guidance from state HCD and other things that have refined everyone's understanding of it, both the cities and the developers. And in this case, when you invoke state density bonus law by having the bonus units in your project, even if you only built one bonus unit, actually technically if you built no bonus units, but you qualified to build bonus units, you get an unlimited number of concessions. You do get a limited number of waivers, but an unlimited number of concessions, which are any things that would physically prevent you fitting those bonus units on a site. And that unlimited number of concessions is frequently things like setbacks and step back requirements that the city planning commission can't even talk about those things, or the city planner who is doing your ministerial review, if it's being done administrative or ministerially rather than at a planning commission hearing, they can't even talk about those things without potentially getting themselves into trouble, to Stu's point about the risk of litigation and all of this. So once you kind of trigger that body of law, as long as you submit the right documents and say, these are the concessions that I will use, you can just opt out of height limit, setbacks, step requirements, and so forth. But SRM with Baxter on Broadway and Merrill Gardens was before the law had changed in this way.
I think Nicole's hand is raised.
Hi, good seeing everyone. I just wanted to, I put in the chat again, just a note about housing, is that it's an affordability crisis and not just a, amount of stock. Of course, obviously having units that are affordable is a huge thing. Currently, I've been tracking Zillow for a number of years, and, currently there are 5,490 people living in Oakland. I put this in the chat. Without a permanent home, and I gave you a link. And then there are 4,272 vacant housing units right now on Zillow, up from 3,900, in June, and then up from 1,400 a year ago. Pre-pandemic, it was like in the 400 on Zillow, and there are over 3,000 Airbnb rentals in Oakland currently. So it's a complex situation that I think people should be aware of when you're thinking about this.
Thanks.
I think Myrna and Ken are in the queue. Myrna, you're on mute.
Myrna, are you trying to find your mute button? It's on the lower left, I think. Should be on the controls.
Okay, got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, lost it. What is very apparent, hearing both the experts here and the community folks, this is a whole new world. And I think people will be shocked to find that probably under these new rules, there's no public hearing that's required. There's no public notice that's required. And people will go on thinking, oh, well, when the time comes, I'll make my feelings known to the city council and so on and so forth. That's not going to happen. And so I just have to emphasize again and again, move fast and move fast. That's all. Thanks.
Okay.
I guess I'm next.
Yes, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit wonky, but it seems kind of relevant to the direction the conversation is going. What SB 423 does in terms of providing that streamlining, that ability to just get things approved quickly, is it says it looks at every city's housing, what's called the regional housing need, what is it, the RENA, regional housing something, apologies, I can't remember. I'm sure somebody else on this call remembers what that means. But basically that says Oakland, for example, needs to provide a certain amount of market rate housing, a certain amount of low income housing, a certain amount of moderate income housing. And what SB 423 says is if you're not meeting that goal on any category, then a project that hits that category is ministerial and streamlined.
Yep.
So that's what it says. Now, what they're getting wrong, Oakland is not meeting its market. Thank you, regional housing needs assessment. It's very tricky, and Scott Wiener, who was very tricky about this, Oakland is not meeting its market rate allocation, but officially Oakland doesn't get graded, on it until halfway through the cycle, which is 3 years from now. So in 3 years, this project will be streamlined because the state will recognize that Oakland isn't meeting its allocation. What's confusing them is that San Francisco, it applies now. Why? Because Wiener had San Francisco graded every year rather than every 4 years. And I don't know how he managed to get that through without anyone objecting, but he did. And so in San Francisco, as of about a month ago, a market rate project is streamlined. In Oakland, and I think every other jurisdiction in the state, a market rate project is streamlined 4 years from now, because that's the first time they're graded. And so the point, whether you agree with it or not, the point that the legislation is making is, if a city's not meeting its housing, its housing needs, it should get streamlined. And what they're saying is that applies to market rate housing too. So I hear folks saying all we need is affordable housing. That is not, the state is saying, no, you need market rate housing and affordable housing. So that is what the state is saying, agree with it or disagree with it, in 423. If that made no sense at all, I apologize. I'll try to explain it better, but I did my best.
Hey, Ken, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So when I was looking through these laws and sort of clicking through the links, SCAG has an interesting, summary document with a lot of
SCAG,
links
you
to
want
it.
to spell that out, Tom? SCAG?
SCAG stands for Southern California Association of Governments. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the Bay
ABAG.
Area.
It's ABAG for
ABAG,
Southern
right,
California. Yeah.
exactly, right. And if you go to the statewide list, Oakland is listed as a non-compliant city
That's right.
in that document. Now, what you must be telling me, I think what you're inferring is, it's true we're not compliant, but we don't get penalized for it with this administerial sort of get out of jail free card until 3 years from now.
Well, I think that's right, but I'm surprised to hear that Oakland is listed as a non-compliant city for market rate, because I think you may have seen that Oakland is being listed as non-compliant for affordable. And I think, I don't know, I didn't see the document you're looking at, and maybe Greg or somebody else knows more than I do about this. I think we're not officially non-compliant on market rate until we're monitored, which is at the 4-year mark, and we're only at the 1-year mark now.
And the 4-year mark is from the January 2024, beginning of 423 or something.
All I know is it seems to be in 26 that this is going to happen.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, they I don't think they're not using 423 correctly. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, the application only references, I think I showed you there, the data sheet, at least is on the city's site, right? They only mention SB 35.
Well,
They don't even,
SB 35 is superseded by 423, as far as I understand.
Right. Yeah.
I do want to point out, let's just imagine, and I'm not saying this is true, that everything else the project is doing is correct, and they are using it all correctly, except for 423. The city still has to approve it. It just doesn't have to approve it as quickly. If it's meeting all the other requirements, it will eventually be approved. But they'll still do CEQA, and they'll still do a bunch of things, and they'll still have hearings, but they can't really reject it, as far as I understand.
Right. Okay. Well, I will say this, that I think when you look at some of the aspects of this project, which is it's mostly 2 and 3 bedroom units, or all 2 and 3 bedroom units, and the levels of affordability they're proposing. Again, it's a smaller project, which makes, smaller projects tend to be more expensive than bigger projects on a per unit basis or per square foot basis. That, if the Emerald Fund can't make the CCA project pencil, I don't quite understand how this project would pencil, right? With the, the lack of, the dearth in office space demand and the level of vacancies. It's just, there's a lot of it that doesn't make sense to me, right? who runs a 70-room hotel anymore, right? Or can find a way to do it inside of a mixed-use project, right? There are other feasibility issues. So I think perhaps, at least from RCPC's perspective, what we should do is maybe we draft a letter to the city inquiring about the project and identifying some issues and concerns and pointing out where we think some of the issues might be and looking for a response back from the city. Now, under this process, is the city obliged to respond to letters of inquiry, or are they only obliged to respond to the developer's submittal? That's an interesting question for me, right? Based on what I read. No answers. Perhaps no one knows.
They're not obliged to respond to us, but if we submit a letter, then we put something in the administrative record that undermines the project. And so
Right.
that's part of the value.
All right.
But if we submit a letter ahead of time, we're just doing it because we care. We're not doing it pursuant to a public process that requires them to respond. But that doesn't mean that they'll ignore it.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, then I will look for some assistance in preparing that letter. As particularly says, I'm not revealing this, but see, I don't really have a writing arm for the next 2 months, and I have a left-handed typing arm, so I'll be looking for some help from others. Ronnie, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I think a letter is one thing. I don't know, Ken, maybe you're the one who knows the director of planning, but you should be not just sending a letter. You should.
I don't, I've never met the director of planning. I know a couple of the planners. Actually, just one. I know one planner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a way to get to Bill Gilchrist.
As do
think-
I.
I'm on an
This is
advisory
Katie, I'm the chair. Thank you.
I seriously think this is something that if the RCPC decides that it's it's not going to fly, you should not just put a letter in. You should, up it, talk to Dan Kalb and show that it was, it's incorrect analysis by the applicant.
Okay, good. Well, I think that covers it. I don't know if anybody got a chance to look at all these other graphics that were sort of on the site, but obviously it's a building of significant scale for College Avenue. There's no doubt about that. And I think if I go back to my agenda, I just wanted to identify a few future topics. Are there any other topics anybody would like to discuss this evening? And we'll get out of here early.
May I just ask a question? I didn't put my hands up, but I did walk down when I heard about this project because it hadn't been on my radar and I didn't see any postings, the typical yellow posting that us homeowners have to do if we want to, build a trash enclosure. What are the requirements now?
None.
There is a requirement for posting on site, but at a later date. It would be 30 days prior to a decision being made. It would post a draft decision, but this is way earlier in the process.
So this time trigger that we're talking about, though, is, it's important to let people know, and I just wonder how widely this is known in the, like the folks whose houses back up to this, who will be substantially impacted. Are they aware of it?
Not necessarily.
Hard to say. I mean, somebody had some posters out in front of the site, I believe, that have made their way around. But whether those people
taken down.
Was that right? Okay.
They were taken it down. I have my hand up when we're ready.
Yeah, we'll have Nicole and then Mark and then Annetta and Barney.
Great. Yeah, so two things. One is that if you could scroll down, Tom, for the usable, I just want to point out there's a quote unquote usable open space in the project.
Right.
And it's the green, it's basically the current driveway. Yeah,
It's the
that,
parking lot and the site of the Victorian, I believe.
right. And then there's some claim by the applicant that there are no buildings older than 40 years that will be, impacted. But the Victorian is obviously Victorian. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think what happened was about 20 years ago, perhaps, or 30
They
years
moved it.
ago. They moved it, but they also jacked it up and put a floor under it and reconfigured the interior.
Right.
And it does, he said, according to him, it doesn't show up on any city list.
Okay. Anyway, but I think that's disingenuous, I guess, for the for the applicant. And then the second thing I wanted to say is, this is the land use committee. What are next steps? Are we going to, is the land use committee, I'm not a member, I'm literally 2 doors down from the project, 2 doors south on College. What will the land use committee do in terms of informing the public? And what are the next concrete next steps?
Let me answer that, Tom.
Thanks.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, the RCPC board meeting was a week or so ago, and we discussed this project because it had just come to our attention. And we have developed a couple steps. First was to raise the issue with the land use committee to get the kind of input we've gotten today, which I think has been very helpful in understanding what the state law is and getting an impression of what the views are on the project. The next step was several members of the RCPC board were getting together, led by Tom, in writing an article for the Rockridge News, which is widely distributed, that would have sidebars, or it might be 2 articles that both covers the new landscape legally regarding housing projects in Oakland and the various laws we've been talking about. And second, calls everyone's attention to this project. So that was the first concrete steps we wanted to do. Meeting here tonight, and then an article in the next issue of the Rockridge News, which won't be until September, the first weekend in September. We then plan on further discussing the matter and quickly coming to decisions on how we should approach it and how we should approach the city of Oakland. And some of the things that were suggested, a letter, actually making contact with some of the personnel at the highest level in the planning department, and to take a very proactive position.
And those decisions that will be made, are they made by whom and by what process?
By the RCPC board, but reaching out and getting community input. That was the idea, to try to get something as quickly as we could in the Rockridge News. And we will have a follow-up meeting in the land use committee here. And we will also seriously figure out other ways of communicating with people in the community and getting their feedback.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's
you
one of
need
the
to
reasons
reach
why the
out,
letter.
get feedback, consolidate it, and then there needs to be a discussion, I think, because it's so different than what we've been dealing with before. I'm a 30-year resident of Rockridge.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We want it to be an open process, but we also have to act quickly. So we will be doing all we can to outreach to the community, get views. And the first part is to just get information out in as good a form as we can, so that it's readable to as many people in the community.
Annette?
Right.
Yeah, I was actually interested in discussing the Airbnb changes. I don't know if anyone else had an interest in that. I noted that Nicole Lazaro brought that up as an issue that impacts our housing stock and affordability, which it does. I'd like to alert the group to a very interesting website that's global called Inside Airbnb that tracks the impact of Airbnbs on cities around the world in terms of housing. And in fact, it's excessive in many cases. The city of Barcelona, among others, has opted to shut down all Airbnbs in the next couple of years because it has impacted their housing affordability to that extent. and they're not alone, but they are the largest city to do so far. Oakland's stats are included here on the Airbnb site. You can search for Oakland, California. It comes up. And the stats are interesting. It gives the number of Airbnbs. Most of them are, 74% of them are single family units, either apartments or full houses, both of which things are not legal under the Oakland ordinance, but Oakland does not enforce. And that's about 1,700 units that are not being rented long-term. But again, Oakland does not address enforcement. So my question is, how are we going to see to it that the city of Oakland, with its meager resources at the moment, in any way, shape, or form, actually enforces? Because there are significant violations going on now. You'll note that there are a number of people listed as super hosts, and that Oakland does require that you cannot aggregate and host a whole bunch of units as a business. And yet there are quite a number of people in Oakland who do precisely that. So again, no enforcement, no follow-up. I don't even know if they're aware of these people, but somehow this does need to be dealt with. It seems to have run amok, and it's certainly run way beyond the capability of the city at the moment to deal with it.
Yeah, and that, I'll just speak briefly to that. I was thinking of it as a future land use committee meeting discussion. But the city has been working on this thing. I think they got direction from the city council back in 2016 to put together a policy. They hired a consultant, I think sometime around 4 years later. They came out with a draft report. And I think they're working their way through a consultation process that they did in 2023 and early 2024. First with the community, and then with, I guess, providers like some of the companies like Airbnb and VRBO and so forth. But it's kind of in abeyance right now. I think it's waiting for their next sort of public discussion process, at least as near as I can figure that that's where it currently stands. I can share some of the stuff that I pulled off the website, but there's a whole section in the Oakland planning, information site that you can look at.
Oh, I have.
Yeah. But I do think it's something that we've been discussing within the RCPC, and something I'm trying to come up to speed on myself. So
okay, I just bring it up because it while we talk about these things, it really does mean that there are quite a number of vacant units which could be used to house people and aren't.
Right. I don't disagree.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't even do Craigslist or the other, like Verbo, the other housing kind of temporary housing agencies. So,
right.
And, and obviously there is the low number of, possibly the really low number of owner occupied units, which is another factor that we really need to have. It's much better if these units are owner occupied.
Right.
Okay.
I think Barney is next.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Thanks, Casey. You can see everybody. For some reason, I can only see a few people.
No problem. Barney?
All right.
Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate the fact that it sounds like the committee is trying to put together a meeting to discuss this further as it develops. Also appreciate the fact that looks like you folks are trying to put together a article for the Rockridge News. We scoured the Rockridge News after we heard about this, trying to figure out what was going on. We were a little surprised that it showed up in Oakland side and in the San Francisco Business Times way before probably anybody in the neighborhood figured out what was going on. And ultimately, we chatted with one of the business owners that'll probably be blown right off the map when if this project goes forward, and they were just stunned. They were shocked. So anyway, and they've been in business probably for a solid 10 years on College Ave. So appreciate you guys' energy and efforts. It's just like you say, something that seems to be coming out of the blue.
Right. Ronnie, is your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to remind you, Tom, that I can put this video up on the RCPC's YouTube, and we can link your materials and such on the website. So send it to me, okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right. Any other comments or thoughts with respect to future items? I'm going to pull back up my future items. I have here, well, there's a Rockridge Community Vision process that is being co-chaired, I think, by Casey and Kristen from the board. And then the last one is just some ideas that I have about how to make a better community. So with no other further ado, I'll say goodnight to everybody. Any closing comments? Thank you all for your participation. I appreciate it. And I can maybe use the video to help fill out the notes that I couldn't write.
And can the chat be saved as well? I don't seem to be able to save the chat.
Happy to look into that.
'Cause
Yes,
that has a lot of links in it.
I get the chat when Casey, when you send me the link, or Tom, to download, because you'll get a notice. It includes a chat, and I'll make a point this time of uploading that to the website.
All right. Very good. I'm going to stop screen sharing. Maybe that'll help me see some things. All right. I'll pull up the chat. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Friendly
and-
plug to join the Rock and Stroll, which will be happening on the Avenue on Saturday, August 24th. RCPC will be there, as many businesses will be participating through the Rockridge District Association. So save the date, August 24th.
All right. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Casey, it was the chat, the chat scroll, if that could be saved.
Thanks.